Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. We are here at 1925 Giants Drive, and the 2025 NFL Draft just completed. We were in the auditorium with Brian Dable and Joe Shane, and now the calls are being made. The recruiting process has begun for undrafted free agents, is a life of its own. The first UDFA for the Giants, Beaux Collins, that's Beaux, from Notre Dame, wide receiver. He's agreed to terms with the Giants, so he'll be coming on. The Giants did not pick a wide receiver in the draft, so that's the first time in this regime's tenure. They obviously went Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, and Malik Neighbors, but now they resort to the UDFAs. It's been a wild weekend for the entire NFL, all the Shedeur Sanders stuff, and I would like to say I mocked Shedeur Sanders at one point to the Cleveland Browns, so didn't necessarily mean what round, but the fact that Shedeur is heading to Cleveland, it's like we all believed, that like we all thought anyway. But for the New York Giants, I will lead off with this quote that I got from a league source today, just talking about the feel of the league and what's happened and winners and losers. And someone told me, and now I'll paraphrase, but the specifics were, you know what? Let me give you the exact quote because I'm going to have it in my column, so I might as well give you the exact quote. And I think if you're a positive Giants fan, or at least if you paid attention to what's going on today, I think you'll appreciate the quote and you will more than likely agree with it because I do think it was a mood-changing NFL draft for the Giants and for Joe Shane and for this franchise. And I'll get to that in a second. But the bottom line is, and here's the quote I got from a league source, with what they did, I think the message was sent. It's been a while, but they're done getting pushed around. And to me, that encapsulates the feeling that I have with the Giants and what they accomplished in this 2025 draft. It started with Abdul and Jaxson, the physicality that they play with, the toughness to the point where Jaxson sometimes is his own worst enemy. Now, the Giants had a tough quarterback in Daniel Jones. Everything else was lacking. Now, Jaxson comes in with a different skill set, and his toughness, his bravado on the field. Let's be honest, neither one of those two guys take any crap. And if you're the New York Giants, not just this regime, but past regimes, you've taken enough crap from the league, from your own fans, from people in your own building that ended up leaving, that it's about time that you need to start creating pushback and stand up and be resilient. And I think what they've done here in this draft, I mentioned Carter, I mentioned Jaxson. Last night, Darius Alexander, he's another guy up front. What was his quote today? I want to give you that. That's in my column. Let's see. Where is it? Well, I can't find it. I know I have it somewhere, but it's the reality is that, to me, and I'll go through, let's run through the draft picks now, and then we'll go back and I'll continue this conversation. But there's a common thread, and the common thread is that the physicality, the toughness, no back down. This group, this 2025 draft class, you had some of it last year, and it was an outstanding draft class last year. But you could see the vision of where this team wants to go. So much talk a couple months ago. What's the plan? What are they planning for? The Giants have no plan. Well, if you paid attention, not just what they did in free agency, Paulson Adebo, Javon Holland, on the back end, what they've done, Chauncey Golston, bringing him on defense, bringing back some of the guys that they liked up front on offense. And now you look at the draft. I mentioned the top 3 guys. Then today, right out of the gate, Cam Skattebo from Arizona State. Now, here's a guy, I'll give you a nugget. You want to know about his toughness and his physicality? Started playing football at the age of 6, borrowed his older brother's shoulder pads, and would go out in the street, and to prove his toughness, he would run into telephone poles. Now, I got to imagine he's gotten a little smarter since then, but the reality is that's the kind of mentality you have. You think of guys on this team, in this franchise, when they've won or even when they've struggled. Ahmad Bradshaw, Brandon Jacobs, the toughness, the Richie Soiberts, guys who just, they pour out guts on the field. That's what they tried to encapsulate in this draft class this weekend. I think they did a damn good job with it. I got to be honest. When you've seen people on social media, in the league, talk to people, even fans, it's overly positive with what they've done. Now, granted, we all know you can't win the season by winning the draft. But I think there is some semblance of optimism because of what they were able to do in the draft. So let's go the rest of the draft today, and then we'll get back to what I was saying, the overview of what the Giants accomplished today and I think moving forward. Interesting. Skattebo was that first pick in the 4th round. What we found out from the Giants afterwards, Brian Daboll said, look, we were going back and forth between Skattebo and Marcus Mbow. That's Mbow, drop the M, and it's Mbow, the offensive lineman from Purdue. Those 2 guys were both in discussion for that first pick in the 4th round. And then Mbow was left on the board in the 5th round. They were pleasantly surprised, and they drafted him as well. And then we had the 2 7th-rounders, Thomas Fidone, the tight end from Nebraska. Giants seem to think that his better football is in front of him. He had a great week at the Senior Bowl. He's a guy who's overcome 2 ACL injuries, played for Matt Rule at Nebraska. Ironically, his final game was at Yankee Stadium in the Pinstripe Bowl. Just a tough guy. Seems like he could really grow into a Y tight end. So no problems with physicality there, toughness, grit. And then the final pick for the Giants, Korie Black, who, I've been mocking to the Giants, Oklahoma State corner, has some versatility on the back end, and is another tough guy. So that's the draft class for Joe Schoen. Now, you can check out all my individual grades in our file on northjersey.com. You can find that. Also, I sent out links on X, art_Stapleton. But overall, I think this is an A grade for the Giants and Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll's 4th draft. I think they hit needs without just drafting for need. I think they drafted top-of-the-line players in that spot. Now, when you get into the 7th round, you need to find a little flexibility. You want to go for ceiling or upside. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think Thomas Fidone is going to become, Travis Kelce. But sometimes those tight ends, you find some value in them later in the draft. So it'll be interesting to see him join the group of tight ends that this team has with Daniel Bellinger, Theo Johnson, Chris Manhertz, and then Greg Dulcich, who we know as a former teammate of Russell Wilson in Denver. He's gotten a lot of talk so far this spring from Russ. So, I think in terms of finding guys who are going to get reps and starting time, I think obviously Abdul Carter, Jaxson Dart is a little different animal. They're going to try to bring him along with some patience, develop a plan. Brian Daboll said the plan that we use for him will be similar to the one that we had with Josh Allen. It's not about the player. It's about the profile, about the quarterback and the rookie quarterback who you don't want to thrust into the lineup immediately. It'll be up to Jaxson Dart and his offensive staff, Daboll, Kafka, Tierney, Chad Hall, to see how quickly these guys can get Jaxson Dart up to speed. I would imagine Russell Wilson is the starter. I know Russell Wilson is the starter. I would imagine he's the starter for as long as the Giants are competitive, and that's into the season. Jameis Winston is the backup. We'll see how that goes. And I think the challenge for Dable is finding the time for them to get the Jaxson Dart enough reps in practice to be able to find that avenue to show the Giants that he's growing and learning. Dable said, there'll be opportunities where they'll throw him into practice in, team situations when he's not expecting it, to see how far he comes. So it'll be interesting to see how that breaks down. But all right, let's talk that overview again. And I mentioned this quote the other night from John Mara. So much was talked about. John Mara said, I want to feel better. I have to feel better after the season next year than I did this year, when he talked about bringing back Joe Schoen and Brian Dable and the confidence he had in the process. He praised Shane's process, the draft class that they had, and everything else. Everybody hung on to the priority of getting a future quarterback, which that was a big point, no doubt about it. But if you remember that day also, and John Mara talked about, I'm tired of seeing teams go up and down the field on us. And right away, everybody took that as a shot across the bow of Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator. Whether it was or it wasn't, Shane Bowen came back as defensive coordinator. The more I thought about it, the more I made calls about it and inquired and talked about that idea. That was a mindset. That was a resiliency that John Mara was talking about. That it wasn't just teams running up and down the field. It was the idea that this team for far too long has gotten pushed around, and that mindset has not changed. And unfortunately, you only have a handful of players on this team that showed that kind of toughness, that grit. So no matter how tough Dexter Lawrence is, it's just one guy. So out of the 22, how do you get to a point where it's not acceptable to get pushed around? And that's by bringing in players, both as free agents, but more importantly, building a foundation around guys who chase greatness. Heard that phrase from Abdul Carter and Jaxson Dart, chasing greatness. Now, one of the things I said, we want to talk about identity, the idea of identity. Who are the Giants? They have no identity. I think a big problem for the Giants for far too long is that they've tried to create the identity of the past. Just look at last year. What was the identity the Giants had last year? It was the 100th season. There's too much, can we repeat the past for the Giants? Rather than recreating an identity, you should just be looking to establish a new identity. And the new identity, I think, is perfect from what Lawrence Taylor told Steve Serby in the New York Post last night, and we mentioned it on last night's show, if you missed it. There was a lot of talk about Abdul Carter wanting number 56 to get unretired. Look, that was not happening. I told you before it was not happening. Then Lawrence Taylor said it's not happening. He's not going to unretire 56 for a kid that he's never met. It's just not going to happen. And the Giants aren't going to do it. They're not going to put that pressure. There's a big difference between putting the number one of Ray Flaherty with the blessing of his family on Malik Neighbors' back. Nobody was looking at, well, Malik's got to live up to Ray Flaherty. No disrespect intended to Flaherty or the Flaherty family, but we're talking apples and oranges here when you're talking Lawrence Taylor, the greatest defensive player in the NFL history, and the number one player in Giants history, 100 years, best player, and someone who belongs in the top 100 with the Giants, but is not Lawrence Taylor. So that idea of taking these numbers, and it wasn't going to happen. But LT's line, and I thought was very interesting, and I've heard it from other guys before. Get your own number and make it your own. And I think that's an important aspect to this whole thing, is that when will this team make its own identity? And I think you're getting there. I really do. Listen to some of these quotes before we wrap up here. And again, thanks to Paul Wood for doing all the producing for these late night shows. Tonight isn't necessarily late, but it's late enough when you've been up and about over the last couple nights. So thanks to Paul for doing this. But here's some of the quotes, okay? You have Skattebo today. Physicality is definitely contagious. If someone gets run over, it hypes the other guys up and gets them going. Fair point, right? Now, I think there's a misconception at the idea that physicality can only be brought on the defensive side of the ball. It works both sides. Let's not forget how the Eagles beat up the Kansas City offense last year. So you need a little toughness too offensively. And the Eagles have certainly been the toughest offensive team up front that we've seen. Here's another quote that I got. This was from, you know what? Here's the quote from that I was looking for before, from Darius Alexander, defensive tackle, third-round pick, be that 3 technique next to Dexter Lawrence when he's ready. I love taking my opponent's will and just watching them go to the sideline and not know what to say to their coach. Great line, right? A great line from a defensive player. Unbelievable. I'll give you this one from Marcus Mbow today. Putting people on the ground, winning reps, demoralizing people. That's always fun. Now, all of these words mean nothing if you can't turn on to the highlights and see these guys putting it into action. There's no question that Abdul Carter has toughness and is a dog, right? We talked about Malik Neighbors. They needed more dogs, D-A-W-G. You could come up with as many phrases as you want. And the Giants came up with smart, tough, and dependable. Pretty good that first year. I probably would have maybe switched them up so fans couldn't use it as an acronym. Figure it out. Smart, tough, dependable. An acronym to make fun of them when things weren't going well. But the reality is that this team has been pushed around. And I wrote this in my column, and it'll be posting on northjersey.com. But for those of you watching and listening, I was pretty proud of this line that I wrote. So I'm going to throw it in there. When a vision comes together, emphasizing the building of a team that refuses to get bullied between the lines, in back page headlines, and on banners pulled by planes over MetLife Stadium, the end result looks a lot like this draft class Shane and Dable and their staffs put together. That's what these 3 days were all about. It's a different feel for these younger players now coming into this building because of who they are on the field. Skattebo, Mbow, guys that were taken in the first 3 rounds, Alexander, then Jaxson Dart, and obviously Abdul Carter. So for the Giants, look, it's an exhale now. Like I said, you go into the UDFA draft, so to speak, now, and you're running around, and my phone's going crazy, so I'm sure there are other undrafted guys that have come other than Bo Collins, but I wanted to be able to jump on here and make sure that I talked to you guys and got this final podcast out. The only player that I had not mocked in our Giants-only mocks the last 2 months that the Giants ended up drafting, the only one was Thomas Fidone, the tight end from Nebraska. Everybody else was on a mock. I had Abdul Carter. The latest one that posted Wednesday morning, I had Abdul Carter. While I had Jalen Milroe at 34 in the write-up of Milroe, I said if Jaxson Dart was available, it would have taken him. He was not available, and they may actually move up into the back end of the first round to take Dart. I'll cheat a little bit and say at our live draft party show, I did predict that they would trade back up into the first round for Jaxson Dart. So give me a little credit, Okay, give me a little credit. If you're following me on social media today, you know we're pretty much in tune with everything that was going on. So I'm pretty proud of that because that comes from work. It's not necessarily luck. And I do appreciate those of you who reached out to let me know that you saw what was going down today. Third round, Darius Alexander from Toledo. I had him. Fourth round, Cam Skattebo. I had him. Fifth round, Marcus Mbow. I did not have because it shook up with the trade, but I did have Mbow at some point in the draft, and I had him as a potential target. He was listed in one of my 5 favorite fits at offensive line. So I won't take credit for that, but he certainly was in the mix of a guy that I talked about. And then Korie Black, their final pick, the corner from Oklahoma State, I had him in my final mock as well. So not bad. I was pretty proud. This year I had more hits than anything else. Last year I had 2 hits because instead of taking Malik Neighbors, I predicted a trade up for Drake May. I did have last year Drew Phillips and Theo Johnson, and I had Tyler Nubin mentioned as a condition. So that's kind of where we're at. So that's where we're at. Hopefully you guys enjoyed all of our coverage, both on NorthJersey.com, in the record, and of course here on All In. I wanted to go back to Thursday night, thank the Giants for allowing us to broadcast again from their draft party. Carrie, Sydney, Jen, all the help at the stadium, those people who chipped in to help us, we really appreciate it. Mike and Miguel producing on Thursday night, Steve Serby of the New York Post, and of course John Schmelk from the Giants pitching in, and it's a wrap for this week. Paul and I doing Thursday night, Friday night, and tonight. It's time to exhale, like I said. I'm not sure. We'll see if we're going to do any all-in shows this week. We'll see if we can get some guests. It's kind of up in the air at this point. The following week, the 9th and the 10th, going into Mother's Day, is the Giants rookie minicamp. That's the next time that the rookies will be here. It's Friday and Saturday, so I would imagine we will do some all-in shows either that week or after the rookie minicamp, but we'll figure it out when it happens. One final piece of news from the Giants was that Joe Shane said that, as expected, the Giants are not picking up the 5th-year option for Evan Neal. They will see when the team gets here if he's going to be at guard or be at tackle. I think it's going to be at guard, but remains to be seen where he factors into this all, and we'll have plenty of time to discuss it and debate it and see where he ends up. So that's all I got. Hopefully you guys enjoyed everything, and I will be back as quickly as I can. Before we sign off, I want to wish Emma Wood and the New Jersey Rage good luck at the Flames Spring Scorcher Tournament tomorrow at Whitehall, Pennsylvania. And why is there a Giants connection? Not only is Emma a big Saquon Barkley fan, it happens to be Saquon Barkley's hometown. Whitehall, Copley is technically where Saquon grew up, but he went to Whitehall High School, and that's where the tournament is. So, Paul, if you're coaching, enjoy the tournament. Emma, do well, and continue out your Giant weekend. And can't believe you guys are missing the Knicks, but I guess coaching and ball comes first. But anyway, that'll wrap it up for me, and Paul and everyone that contributed to All In over the last 3 days. Much appreciated. I get to go home and spend time with my family as well for a little while now after seemingly missing them all week. So, again, appreciate my Marys for putting up with the life of All In, because we certainly are all in, but my family has learned to be all in with me as well. So that's it. We appreciate everyone watching, everyone listening. Numbers are through the roof. Audience continues to grow. Much appreciated. We will stay all in. We appreciate you being all in. Have a good night. The 2025 draft is now closed. Keep checking back at NorthJersey.com. Our undrafted free agent tracker is always fun. Like I said, Mbow Collins, Notre Dame receiver, first off the top, and then we'll see from there. So again, for Paul, I'm Art. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you next time for the next edition of All In.